Welcome back everyone. This week, producers. What do they do? And how do you do what they do? Before we get into the details, let's define our terms a little. Back in the heyday of the big commercial studios with huge mixing desks and recording to tape and all of that, it took a whole host of people in different roles to make a record. In addition to the artist or band themselves, you might have the recording engineer in charge of the technical side of tracking, an arranger composing parts for session musicians to add into the song, a mixer and a mastering engineer to get it all sounding at its best, and a producer managing this whole crew and being the point of contact with the record label who paid for all of it. Nowadays, the rise of home recording has done a lot to democratize the process, and the word producer has expanded to encompass many or all of these roles. To try and keep this topic at least vaguely manageable, we're just going to focus on that old school sense of the term. A producer in that sense is kind of like a film director. They're not usually the writer or the performer, they're more like a team captain who marshals the resources and people involved in making a record to get them working towards a unified creative goal. That work primarily comes down to two things: the repertoire and the people. With it being easier now than ever before to start recording, it can be tempting to just jump straight in, but I'd argue that one of the most important stages of making a record, and one of the most important things a producer can provide, is pre-production. The artist will put together rough demos of all of the songs. These can be as basic as you like, so long as it gets the idea of the song across as it currently stands. The producer will then listen to the demos and sit down with the artist to try and get a sense of what they're going for creatively with this project. You might end up talking about key influences or particular artistic goals, just generally kind of getting on the same page about the sort of record they want to make. Next, the producer might come back to the artist with some notes on how to develop the song. This might be things like changing the key to make the vocal sit more comfortably in an artist's range, or adjusting the tempo, the groove, the instrumentation, maybe even getting into the nuts and bolts of the lyrics, melody or harmony. Basically, troubleshooting the songs together to make sure that they're the best they can be. This isn't about the producer telling the artist what they got wrong. The aim is to establish the vibe we're shooting for, and then to work together to make sure whatever we do from this point forward is serving that intention. The songs need to be the best versions of themselves that they can be, and they need to make sense as parts of a whole. The other side of the role of the producer is all about the people who have come together to make this idea into a reality. The producer acts as a coordinator and a point of quality control for the various people who might be working with the artist, such as engineers or session musicians, and makes sure that they're working towards the same artistic goals. In the studio, this might involve things like coaching musicians to get the best possible performances out of them, keeping track of what's been recorded so you can be sure you've got good usable takes for every part, and calling the shots and keeping people calm and on task if things go wrong, or thinking on your feet and being ready to make new plans so the project inevitably grows and changes in the course of making it. It's a lot of stuff to keep in your head at once, but you'll only get better at it with practice. But the producer is also there to act as a sounding board and creative advisor to the artist. In some cases, they might even need to act as a mediator to help resolve disagreements. Healthy communication on a project is everybody's job. But we do need to remember that creativity is a highly personal thing, and sometimes people can struggle to talk things through and be flexible without their fears or their egos getting in the way. In those situations, the buck stops with you, with making sure people are able to communicate honestly and constructively on a project. That's a lot of responsibility to be taking on, so do make sure you're also taking good care of your own mental well-being. What the work of producing comes down to in a lot of cases is trying to come to a clear understanding of a project, and then using all the skills at your disposal to make that project happen. It's up to you to have that big picture view that will facilitate the artist's vision within the constraints of the time, budget, and resources available. But above all, the factor that most determines your success as a producer is trust. This is a relationship, and whatever your skills and experience and perspective, it's the artist's trust in you that will shape your interaction with the project. It's up to you to center your approach on really listening and to make a creative space where the artist can communicate freely and openly about their work. What that relationship looks like will depend on what works best for the artist. Generally, encouragement and nurture are at the heart of this, especially for people new to recording. They're sharing something very personal in an unfamiliar and potentially intimidating scenario, and it's your job to make that as easy as possible for them to do. As they work, you're trying to keep them in a place of creative flow and productivity, striking that balance between exploration of creativity and getting through the labor of love that is the recording process. Now, in some cases, generally with artists you have some experience with, you may find they respond well to a bit of pushing, more like a personal trainer or a sports coach than a therapist, encouraging them to stretch themselves to outdo their past achievements. This can be a productive approach with certain personality types, but I would absolutely stress the importance of consent, responsiveness, and deep, well-founded trust here. You are not the boss in this situation, so if your client needs that kind of firmness to perform at their best, you should be providing that firmness as a service to them. Approach it gradually and responsively, and check in during breaks to make sure that you're on the right track. Producing history has more than its fair share of stern taskmasters who turn the studio into a living hell. Don't be that guy who justifies inhumane treatment by saying it gets results. That said, even outside of this sort of approach, sometimes we all need a little push in the present to get us to the future goals we've set out, so don't fall into the opposite trap of short-term people-pleasing and lose sight of the big picture. Your guiding principles as a producer should be to champion the artist's vision, not to impose your own. You're there to provide them with the tools and guidance to articulate what they want to say. If you can't be a fan of the artist and the project that you're thinking of working on, then this is not the gig for you. If you're not putting your heart into it, you're not doing the job. And lastly, as a producer, you are in a position that depends on real trust, not only creatively, but personally. And while your creative responsibility is to the work, your ethical responsibility is to the person making the work, and that takes priority. No album, however good, is ever worth breaking the artist's heart over. Thank you for joining me for another talky one. If you've got any good production war stories, or there's a topic you'd like me to do a video on, please do get in the comments. And if you like this video, I'd really appreciate it if you could click the thumbs up. I've got a bunch of other videos lined up, so go ahead and subscribe if you'd like to catch them. See you in the next one. Bye.